It's great to see you tonight. My name is Deborah Mutnick. I am a professor of English at Long Island University's Brooklyn campus, and I am currently the chair of English philosophy, the Department of English Philosophy and Languages. Starting from the Paumanok is a series of annual lectures on American literature and culture that was started by the English department at the Brooklyn campus in 1983 by naming the series after Walt Whitman's great poem, which invokes the Algonkian name for Long Island. The English department acknowledged LIU's geographic and cultural connection with one of our foremost literary figures. The Paumanok has been supported by the Mellon Foundation and Long Island University's John P. McGrath Fund, the History Department, the Honors Program, the English Department's Voices of Rainbow series, and the Gender Studies Program, which have all generously provided funding for the series over the years. This year, we thank in particular the John P. McGrath Fund and the Honors College for their support. I was going to read a long list of past lectures, but I will forgo that given the time constraints now. But among them, just a few are Claudia Rankine, Edwidge Danticat, Alison Bechdel, Lynn Nottage, Walter Mosley, Colson Whitehead, and then going all the way back to Bell Hooks, Houston Baker, and Irving Howe. He was the first one in 1984 or 1983, I guess. After the readings, we'll have a brief Q&A session. Please post your questions in the Q&A located at the bottom of your screen. Tonight, we are very proud to feature and welcome home MFA alumni Wang Ping and Willie Perdomo. Let me introduce my colleague, Professor Louis Periscandola, who for many years directed the English department's Voices of the Rainbow series and will be moderating tonight's program. Please welcome Louis Periscandola.
Hi, I am Louis Periscandola, and I am a member of the English department. I'm happy to introduce both of the speakers today. One of them was a former student of mine, Willie. Wang Ping is going to be reading first. She is a poet, writer, photographer, performance, and multimedia artist. She was born in Shanghai and grew up on a small island in the East China Sea. She came to study in the United States in 1985, earning a master's degree from LIU Brooklyn and a PhD in comparative literature from NYU. She's the author of over 12 books of poetry, prose, and translation. And most recently, the poetry collection, My Name is Immigrant from 2020, and the memoir, Life of Miracles, along the Yangtze and Mississippi. That's 2018. And that was a winner of the AWP Creative Nonfiction Award. Other works include 2 collections of short stories, American Visa and The Last Communist Virgin, winner of the Minnesota Book Award. She also has, additionally, she has published a novel, Foreign Devil, and a cultural study, Aching for Beauty, Foot Binding in China, winner of the Eugene M. Caden Award for Best Book in the Humanities. She is Professor Emerita at Macalester College in Minnesota, where she taught for 21 years. Please welcome Wang Ping.
Hi, everyone. It's such an honor and pleasure to come back and meet people from the old place and also the first place I landed in New York. Actually, the next day I arrived in New York, I went to school. And So it was quite chaotic for me because I thought I knew English, but turned out my English was like second grade English and level, and I was doing MA in literature, and I met some very kind professors. We chatted a little bit, and those professors happened to be really great writers, poets, and screenplay. And they have been very kind to me. And so I'm going to attribute this reading to Professor Kenneth Bernard, Professor Louis Walsh, both passed away, and also the New York press hanging loose publisher Robert Hirschhorn, who published one of my first translation book, and they're all passed. So, but their spirit lives on. So I will start reading. I will read from the books from My Name is Immigrant, and also some poems from my two new manuscripts, and one of them will come out from Sunflowers Press, and the other was from Mad Hat Press. Immigrant can't write poetry. Oh no, not with your syntax, said Professor to her daughter-in-law, a Chinese poet writing in English. She walked to mountain, she walks to a mountain. She walked to mountain now, she is walking to a mountain now. What difference it make? What difference does it make? In nature, no completeness, no sentence really complete thought. Language, our birthright and curse. Pay no mind to immigrant syntax. Poetry, born as water, move best when free, undammed. And the next called Dew of the Himalaya. It's spring and it's time to plant potatoes. And I'm going to read two poems. This one is Potato from the Himalaya, the Everest. And then the other one the potato from my own garden. Jewel of the Himalaya. It's not the gemstones or fossils, sold to tourists and museums, says Sherpa Lamu of Dingboche. It's not even dao barred, the lentil soup that keep us nimble like mountain goats. The West calls it potato. The Chinese call it tudou, bean of earth. But we call it alu, small, muddy, bountiful, heavier than our mountains. In spring, before snow melts, the whole village stands still. No cooking, no music, no fire or visitor. In silence, we plow, bending over the soil until every seed enters the earth. Then we wait outside the stone walls, no human allowed into the fields, only yaks and dogs to enrich the soil. When rain comes and leaves push through ice, we crawl in, children and women, baskets and prongs in hands, weeding, breaking clay, plant by plant, field by field, mountain by mountain. There's no other way around it, says Lamu from Dingpoche, standing tall, 20,000 feet above the sea, on the Nepalese plains. Alus need to be cradled like this, 3 times a year, on our hands and knees, she laughs, teeth sparkling against her chapped face, purple and beautiful from the Himalaya sun. Above us, the Amanda Blom looms under our feet. Alus dig into thin soil and boulders, dissolving minerals, turning the sun into flowers, white lilacs petals with yellow hearts. It's more than a muddy potato or small bean of the earth. It's Alu, Alu, Alu. Call her, raise her from the deep, Jew of the Himalaya, our goddess, our mother, savored by her children of warriors and peace, says Sherpa Lamu of Dimpoche from Everest. Next one is a poem. The title, How I Got My Job in Academia. I wasn't really never trained to get a job in academia during my 8 years PhD at NYU, and I didn't plan to because I just assumed my English was never good enough to get a job to teach. So when this opportunity came and I did something innocent and unusual and pretty wild. So here's the poem. How I got my job in academia. I read Chinese Toilet for my job talk, a story about excrement. Towards lunchtime, all the professors and students were eating turkey sandwiches. I had no clue how to present myself, dress, manner, content for the job talk. My PhD program never thought I would apply for a position in academia, nor did I, with English as my second tongue. I didn't expect to get a job from the elite place in Midwest. So I sang odes about shitholes in China, how I hid in the public toilets and chicken coop to read Romeo and Juliet, Pushkin's poems, War and Peace, Dead Souls, and Jack London's Call of the Wild, all banned as pornography, all hand-copied, all missing pages. I made people laugh a lot, mouths full of turkey. I got a job and taught poetry for 21 years until I'm ejected from the lily white hole and banned to re-enter. And I'm the luckiest person on earth. Next is a prose poem. It's called Old Home. I use Chinese words. It's in Chinese called Lao Jia, which is our root to our ancestors. At 15, my father ran away from his widowed mother to fight the Japanese. I'll come back with a PhD and serve my country with better English and knowledge, I pledged at the farewell party in Beijing, 1985. Home, Jia, a roof under which animals live. When asked where I am from, I say, Weihai, even though nobody knows where it is, even though I've never been to that place. My father lost his left ear in a bayonet fight with a Japanese soldier. 2 years later, American cannons split his eardrums. The back lady stopped her cart on a busy street and peed onto a subway grate. Did you jump or fly? Asked my landlady from her mahjong table. Then she laughed and told me her husband had jumped ship 10 years ago. When he opened his 5th Chinese takeout, he bought her a passport and flew her to Queens. The only thing he liked to talk about was his old home, Weihai, its plump sea cucumbers and sweet apples, men with broad shoulders, thick sides, and girls with long braids making steamed bread. Back home, I had no money, but I never felt poor, she said, shivering behind her fruit stand. Here, if my money goes down below $4,000, I panic. She scanned the snow-covered streets of Chinatown. I guess I really don't want to be homeless here. I hired the babysitter when she mentioned her hometown was Weihai. The president visited the rice paddies in Vietnam, where a pilot had been downed 33 years ago to bring his bones home. My father tried to return to Weihai after his discharge from Navy. With his rank, he could find job only in a coal mine town nearby. My mother refused to go. He went alone and got sick with TB. Mother ordered me to date the county administrator's son so he could help father come home. No, I'm not sad, the street kid shook her head. How can I miss something I never had? On her 60th birthday, my grandma went home to die, sailing from the island to Shanghai, from Shanghai to Yantai, then 2 buses to Weihai. I carried her onto the big ship at the Shanghai port, down to the bottom, where she would spend 3 days on a mattress on the floor with hundreds of fellow passengers. How are you going to make it, Grandma? I asked. She pulled out a pair of embroidered shoes from her parcel and placed them between my feet. My heart and liver, come to Laojia soon, before it's too late. House, Fang, a door over a square, a place, a direction. He never lost his accent, never learned Mandarin or the island dialect. Weihai, a small city in Shandong province, on the coast of North China Sea, a home where my grandfather and his father were born, where my grandma married, raised her children, and now lies in the yam fields, nameless, next to her husband, an old frontier to fend off Japanese pirates, a place I come from, have never set my foot on. It's my Laojia, old home. Back from America, my mother furnished her apartment on the island, bought a new home in the suburb of Shanghai, and is seeking a third in Beijing. A cunning rabbit needs 3 holes, she wrote to us, demanding our contributions. They swore before boarding the ship that they would send money home to bring more relatives over. In return, they were promised that if they died, their bodies would be sent back home for burial. I drink American milk, a few drops in tea. I eat American rice, Japanese bread. Chinese comes to me only in dreams, in black and white pictures. My mother buried her husband on the island of East China Sea, where he lived for almost 50 years, after he ran away at 15 from his old home on the Yellow Sea. Room, Wu, a body unnamed and homeless until it finds a destination. We greet a stranger with, "Where are you from?" When we meet a friend on the street, we say, "Where have you been? Where are you going?" Jia, a roof under which animals live. Fang, a door over a square, a place, a direction. Wu, a body unnamed and homeless until it finds a destination. Tangled roots for wandering souls. I'm going to read. Next is this poem this is poem, the next poem is for Professor Walsh and to LIU English Department. 33 years ago, I walked into a wrong class, poetry. I sat down and got hooked to the entangling game of heart. Poetry led me to Allen Ginsberg, Philip Glass, Gary Snyder. Poetry led me to the Twin Cities on the Mississippi, where I fell in love with rivers and purple prairies. Poetry led me into an elite academia on the bluff. For 21 years, I opened new windows and doors with poetry. For 21 years, I lit up new stars in darkened eyes. For 21 years, I linked hearts, minds, and body with beauty. For 21 years, I healed wounded souls with laughter. For 21 years, I never missed a single day teaching poetry. For 21 years, students loved me, authorities hated me. I did something right. I've battled hate with poetry. I've spread love through poetry. Next is What Keeps Us Alive, a potato poem. And suddenly you come out of the ground, one by one, clump by clump, taking over the garden. I tossed you into the soil a month ago. The earth just started thawing. Spring seesawing with winter, snow, sun, frost, snow. The garden was not ready for life. But you, my potato friends, could no longer wait, sitting through the winter in the garage, frozen, thawed, frozen, your bodies soggy with rot, skin wrinkled, sickly pink and green and droopy sprouts. You have used up all the sugar to stay alive. I know I should just dump you in the compost. Instead, I returned you to the garden, where you were born and grew for generations. I dug holes still half frozen and buried you there. Snow fell, then frost, then snow again. I've forgotten all about you, my lumpy friends. I've forgotten the earth and the spring in the tyranny of last winter's storms. But today you popped from the garden together, as if by appointment, as if by the order of spring, dark green leaves, fuzzy, thick, promising another harvest in fall. How did you endure such hardship, my friends? How did you hang onto the last ounce of sugar to push through this dark, dark winter? Is this the poem you try to write for us every year? Hang on to the sweetness of hope for the first bite of spring, and it tastes good. The last poem is called Jerusalem, Jerusalem, which I wrote many years ago. I wrote this for peace, and I'm reading this for peace because there are so many wars going on and starvation. So it's impossible to sink in the Dead Sea, almost. Slabs of stone reaching for tombs, witness to untold stories. We didn't plan this, but every morning when the sun opened the sky with orange and blue, the boys began to climb up the steps, through the Jaffa Gate, the empty alleys of shops, cafes, homes, through the X-ray machines and guards, jumping, sliding, trudging, singing towards the wall to press their faces against the stones in the prayer sea. Nobody told them to. When the sun went down, their short, chubby legs carried them back, singing Moses Came Down from the Mountaintop, a song they had learned at the nursery school in Minnesota. In the Turkish bazaar, we haggled over a t-shirt that said, America, don't worry, Israel stands behind you. Barbed wire hotel along the shore, parched camps beyond the dusty horizon, brown workers hidden in orchards, sparse bridges, sounds of prayers from armored compounds. Today's wind moves through Mount Olive, slicing dream after dream. Who bestows us with this legacy? Who can tell how much is illusion? In the sea of the deep, where mud is black and water boils with the odor of rotten eggs, in the midst of sulfur magic, people converge, the sick and old, the rich and poor, white and olive and yellow and brown. They wait with patience. They wait for miracles. Isabel, the olive-skinned daughter of the Turkish bazaar, walked us through the maze of the old town. Her brother, a sixth grader, gave us oranges from his juice stand when his mom wasn't looking. He whispered his dream of getting out of the slum, of making a movie about his Portuguese father and Arab mother, his grandparents in the West Bank. But how could you understand this unless you speak Arab? He mumbled, turning away. Isabel watched us in the sunset, smile receding from her brown eyes like a tide. Jerusalem, where the land ends and begins, matchless, a path for the return of wailing hearts. Oi, regret comes only after the deed. The light of the plum blossom is gone, only a kindling flame to light her track. How easy to get tangled in the fire of thoughts. Who should laugh? Who should cry? Who should keep the land? Who must go? Who should be a master? Who a slave? Who could live? Who must die? This pain has no tongue. standing on their father's shoulders, children stuffed their prayers into the highest crack they could reach. A dove landed on the wall, cooing through the grass. Would she pick it out? Asked the little one. Would she bring it up to heaven? For the forced desire on fate, for tears turned into flame and cries stifled. In smoke, dip the apple in honey, dip hatred, blood, dip hope and despair, dip remorse hidden in the gut, the long, laughing cry from children's lips, for Isabel and Nava, for every soul, to resettle in the cradle of roots, dip Bethlehem, dip Jerusalem, dip bombs, tanks, checkpoints, dip the world plowed with sorrow in the bowl of honey. The little ones stopped each stranger on the street of Jerusalem. Please repeat our new password. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Thank you.
Thank you, Ping, for that wonderful reading. I first met Ping, I think, many years ago when she gave a reading in the Voice of the Rainbow series. That was also the first time that I met Willie, Willie Perdomo. He was also a speaker in the Voice of the Rainbow reading series that I was coordinating. Little did probably either one of us know that he would end up coming to LIU shortly after that. I had Willie for a couple of classes, and having Willie in your class was like having a co-teacher. He knew so much more about poetry than I knew. Sometimes I felt a little embarrassed to be called a teacher in the class. Willie is the author of several books, including Smoking Lovely, the remix, The Crazy Bunch, the essential hits of Shorty Bonbon, which he was writing when he was at LIU. Smoking Lovely, winner of the Penn Beyond Margins Award, and Where a Nickel Costs a Dime, a finalist for the Poetry Society of America's Norma Farber First Book Award. He also has two children's books, Clemente and Visiting Langston. In addition to the awards previously mentioned, he has also won the Foundation for Contemporary Arts Cy Twombly Award for Poetry and a Woolrich Fellowship in Creative Writing from Columbia University and two New York Foundation for the Arts Poetry Fellowships. Willie was recently appointed the Poet Laureate of New York State. He received his MFA from LIU Brooklyn, and he currently teaches at Phillips Exeter Academy. Please welcome Willie Perdomo.
Hello, mic check. Can you hear me, Lewis? Yeah.
Yeah, yes, I can hear you.
All right, cool. So thank you for the invitation to read with Ping tonight. Yeah, I'll have more to say about my experience at LIU, I guess, when we do the Q&A, but I have fond memories of being there. And the one thing that I remember the most is how much I fell in love with books again and reading and being in the library and letting books sort of fall on my head, just browsing the stacks there. But there's so much more to say, and I do vividly recall being in your class, Lewis, and just trying to write essays every other week about everything that we read. So the reading process was an active one, and just kind of learning again how to respond to what I'm reading. So that was wonderful. I'm going to start off with a prose piece as well, and then I'm going to go into reading from the Crazy Bunch. So this piece is called Hawk Feather. The first yawn of morning has its own grammar. not knowing goose from eagle, oak from maple, blame my city-fied eyes. I swore I heard a red-tailed screech soar above a rooftop like an accomplice to an unknown god preying on what might be called a secret. As if a word was scratched out of my day, what meaning I tried to find was already falling from the branches. Not a sense of petal or leaf, but the air between questions. These days, faithful to my dream-keeping habits, I seek refuge in realms often romanced as forever. And on most nights, you can find me praying for something to believe in with both hands. Now it's true, the magnolias were whispering yes, you must believe. The cool of it all is that before the hawk appeared, they were gone. No note, no glass of water, just sunlight left to chill on the edge of a windowsill. There are rules to this being reborn once a year, you know. This is how we start spring, packing our wool socks in winter bins, knowing love is always a story, always a man cutting paper with his fist, always asking a miracle how many sugars they want with their coffee. I'm going to read from my most recent collection called The Crazy Bunch. And it's weird. It's not weird, but just kind of reading from the book. The book came out in 2019. And sometimes I start from the front, going to the back. Sometimes I start right in the middle and sort of spread out. The book chronicles a weekend in the lives of five young Black and Puerto Rican men, respectively, in the early 90s, at the dawning of the hip hop era. And it's a tragic weekend in some respects. It's a coming of age weekend. There is some joy, there is some celebration along. And I'm going to read toward the end of the book. We are sort of coming toward Sunday, and by this point, some of the characters of the five, only I think three are left, and there's sort of a mourning process going on. Drug War Confidential. Let me just say right now that we can't stop, won't stop. We're in the trillions and still on the come up. What took the bunch so long? Your number was called last week. Later then, later now. Well, why are we here? Tell us what's going on up there. We want to know. No, you mean down there? No, right here. False claims, fake news, old blues, blood and feathers, golden water, bad weather, black bodies, brown detentions, low retentions, you know, same old, same old. Well, shit, let's celebrate. But we're supposed to be free now, man. Yo, we're free then. We're just learning how to love, man. Leave us be. Nah, that's a game for the play, my young brothers. This can't be the end. Where are my homies? Where's my block? Don't waste our morning, man. It's time to go. Why those burners all up in my face like that, all me? Well, how many ways did you choose to be alive? Revolution, say amen. Every fight should request a repeat. We ask, you answer. That's the way it is down here. Oh, you mean right here? Oh, you must think we're joking. Then why are you smiling? What's so funny, man? And here we were, right in the middle of building a pill-free town. Who are all these women wearing white and smoking cigars? Why are they looking at the sun? Why are they pointing three fingers at us? All is fair in love and drug wars, homie. You ain't the only one taking pictures. On Sundays. So again, this is the book starts on a Friday, ends on a Sunday. On Sundays, we composed our own music, tapped the nickel against the mailbox, pounded the wall with the heel of our palms and sought a demo-type sound. Sundays were the sound of a tobacco patch crashing on the tip of a boot, the nimbus of gospel and gain rejoicing at the feet of laughter and loot. San Martin held us down in word, if not in deed. Santa Bárbara held us down in word, if not in need. San Lázaro held us down in pocket, if not in feed. On Sundays, number slips trickled from maxi sleeves and dream books slept on discount racks. Sundays were for your best clothes, which meant that every day was Sunday. Two birds sat on a crucifix and grandma's church hat was damn near auctioned at the players' ball. Sundays were for sonnets and aunties, bonnets and Bibles, a mourning dove nesting near your window guard, a rumor upgraded to libel, making babies to a faint chirp and being late to your confirmation. Everything damn near legal was damn near closed on Sunday. On Sundays, we had to give up a piece of our burning. Throughout the book, there's an outfit called the Poetry Cops, and they show up. And the Poetry Cops stand for Consolidated Poetry Systems. And they interview this kid named Papo, and they interview him throughout, and some of the other members of the crew as well. So it goes cops, Papo, cops, Papo, cops. And they're looking at a photo album. That's how the book starts, by the way. Is it true that you had to bury Dre, Nestor, and Petey at the same time on the same day? Just Nestor. Dre had his own morning rites on St. Nicholas Avenue, and Petey was shipped to San Juan. That much death can't be easy. It was like that with the old schoolers. They didn't like to leave any traces. They always made a point of keeping us in our places. I imagine that much death makes it hard to measure what's fate and what's fair. You'd be surprised how quickly PTHD sets in. You mean PTSD? No, I mean PTHD, post-traumatic hood disorder. You know, semi-automatic, up jump the boogie, oleo, neighborhood registers, homegirls and hand grenades, the big smoke, the residue years, the sellout, wild hundreds, invisible movements, bright felons, roses in the mirror, bone shepherds, Mongol affairs, all that shit sets in. Can you tell us about this? Ortiz Funeral Home was a second home, a forever rest stop, a reverse dreaming, free rum, a workshop on novenas, a spot where you could kiss the dead, a place where you learn your friend's government name, or how to remember the dead. You have to open the door when they knock. The Poetry Cops. This is just Papa. German Shepherd man used to intermission the block every Sunday night. Black bucket hat, stars and rhinestone, all that. I remember. We were at the age where we still couldn't play the corner. I was about to shoot for my killer Dilla, and Edgar said, there he goes, there goes German Shepherd man. Matter of fact, it was Edgar that gave him his name. That night, summer was fat, heat like a vat of hot showers, and closer to Park Avenue, German Shepherd man's silhouette glimmered all the way to Montmartre. I just remember the dogs' eyes were different shades of steel and cement. When they got below the L, the dog stood at attention, 3 on his left, 3 on his right, and German Shepherd man commanded them in beats and sharp breaths. Who? What? Ho? Hey, go, shoot, up, hook. Shemeka had just arrived from Savannah. She was scared of dogs, so she watched from a fire escape. The dogs lined up in front of the picnic tables by the community garden. German Shepherd man said, who? And the dogs jumped up on the table, turned around, faced German Shepherd man, and decorated the block like a museum wing of statues. Then German Shepherd man talked in a whisper, and the dogs did an about face, jumped off the table, 3 veered to his right, 3 veered to his left, and they walked west back into the mist. And for a blip, the block was a silent film, but you could hear sweat drops rippling down your still hairless underarms, a hunger knot curling in your stomach, a squad of flies feasting on a dirty diaper, and a dead body wrapped in a linoleum rug. Killer Diller used to be the end game for Skelzies. Now you jet down the beast stair and hope you come out free. It might be true that the pursuit of liberty and happiness likes to go solo, but like we used to say over and over again, Ain't no fun if I can't get none. They won't find us in books. And after we officially gain entry into the brotherhood of bad mother flowers, what could our mothers do but lose sleep, wake into prayer, prepare herbs and apples, cursive the names of our enemies on loose leaf and let their names dust in the sunlight. Now everything is clean, rezoned and paved, tenements abandoned like whack parties. What is left for us to do but summon our bullies from their graves and liberate ourselves from influence? Gone are the old spots near the takeout, old flames where we used to make out, the spots where the light used to fade out, and the letters we wrote from burning buildings. Our shoulders were made of stone, our evil was translucent. Turn us into mortals so we can cry without judgment. Surrender our cool and watch us morph into men. Let it be known that we chased killer dealers before the cans got kicked for good. We were made from repeating blocks. Holler if you hear us. There was never a once upon a time because all it takes is one person to get away with it, to get away and get over, to get some and get up. Here we go. Come on. Here we go. You are history, you said. If being free means burning a few things, then play that number for us straight. The corner was between us and the world. Sometimes you just needed to be okay with not telling. If anyone asks you about your destiny, don't explain. Maybe this is the story we need to turn ourselves into music, bass and bully, a string pulling at both ends. They won't find us in books, you used to say. Everybody say, yeah, and you don't stop. We practice our lives in lobbies and lay away ganders and goofs, boosting lines from the radio, breaking dynamite styles. We were God bodies. We had God in our bodies. That's what Brother Lowe used to say. He used to say, a man can stand on the corner long enough to see a dream etched on a herb's forehead, to see desperation exit from the subway station, to see a tragic hero come back to reclaim his city. So we downloaded his bars and gems, and no doubt when it was time to tell our story, out would come fire and spit. This is the last poem. It's called Ghost-Faced. The ghost face grills a display of beans and detergent, picks his afro like a cowboy in a saloon, and reflects on a memory of beatdowns and bruises, super friends and losers. No use in total recall. Remember that night when the muse decided to use the block and left before the party started jumping? You want to say, I know that walk. But it's not what you thought because it's never what you think. You listen for that volley of Rebel King chants from rooftop to rooftop. On the real, coming back is a choice. All the cuchifrito joints are shut down and the number hall now sells 2-for-1 pizza slices. Where's the crew? And someone yells from down the block, "Come mierda, ven acá." What if you faded into the blackness of black? Who would be there to say, try me? You definitely know the answer, but you can't be the first to say you saw something. Otherwise, you'll be the first to get asked. Thank you.
Thank you, Willie, for that wonderful reading. Now we have some time to ask questions. I wanted to ask the first question, and I wanted to ask you guys, Ping, you've already done this, Willie a little bit too, about your experiences at LRU.
You know, I was a second career student, so I didn't go back to school, you know, for almost 20 years before my first and second attempt at college. And when I first sent a note to Marilyn Boutwell, I think was her name. She actually asked me if I wanted to teach there, or was I interested in was I actually interested in being an MFA student? And I said, no, I actually want to be a student, but I had to take my, I had to get my BA first. So I remember talking to Seeley, and basically I was able to finish my BA. This was at a time where schools still gave life experience credits, but you had to write a particular essay. I think I wrote about 20 pages of an autobiographical piece of what I was basically doing over the last 20 years, which was writing and being a poet in the world and working in publishing and so on and so forth. And then I went right into the MFA program. And what I remember wasn't so much the workshops. I think, I had teachers like Walsh, I had John High, and I learned a really valuable lesson about patience with John High. I came with my thesis, which was Shorty Bong Bong, and it was about all of 80, 90 some odd pages long. And I remember John saying, do you mind if we go have an espresso? I was like, sure, let's go get an espresso. And that took about 20 minutes. And then he said, you mind if I have a cigarette? And I said, sure. And that took about another 20, 25 minutes. So, and then the class was over. And it felt like I was like, oh man, this dude is trying to play me right now. But I think what he was telling me that I needed to be patient. The other thing is, I remember taking classes with McGarity on Caribbean Lit. That was a great class. I remember research methods with Swaminathan. I remember being able to develop independent courses with you, Lewis. We did a whole course on slave narratives. I read a few of them and wrote papers on them. With Deborah Mutnick, I was interested in autobiographical literacies and vernaculars and how to use them in writing, and giving her pages from some of the narratives that I was working on. I worked with Bennett on American Lit after World War II. That was a book every week, I think, plus a 2 or 3 page report. So it was those were classes were the ones that I think really were the writing workshop for me. And then of course the community. The community was invaluable. They're friends that I still have from that time in my life, and being situated in New York was of course a bonus. But it was a valuable experience in my relationship to writing, annotating my books, keeping a notebook, and what it meant to actually respond to literature. And it happened so quickly. And then subsequently, I was able to. I was teaching during my time while I was there. I was an adjunct at Fordham, but being a student made me a much better teacher.
One of our favorites, Yanni Perez, has been jumping up and down in the chat room. We should give a shout out.
Yeah. Yanni, I think Yanni was in my class as well. So
Yes.
yeah, we graduated together, and she's an awesome playwright and poet. And again, she was just part of that sort of community. We all took care of each other and hung out and when we could. But it was a thriving community. We had a writing center back then. So there were good times. And of course, I have to give a shout out to Karen and Patrina, who held it down on the 4th floor. And those are my sisters there. So, and they have a nickname for me, which I will not divulge. But
Ping, you want to share some of your memories? He's got it. Yeah. Ping, you have to unmute.
Sorry about that. So I started LIU 1985, sounds like so ancient. Then my last semester at LIU, I was supposed to take a literature class, and Tristan Shandy and Pamela, I remember the 2 names. And I was like groaning because I took a look at Tristan Shandy and just like, I couldn't understand what they're saying. And I have to take that class, and I walked, Long Island University, there are a lot of rooms, and it's a little bit maze to me. And somehow I walked into the classroom, and there was this strange looking professor And you know, he was wearing like two shirts, and both shirts were misbuttoned, right? And he had a cold, had a running nose, and he was borrowing tissues from a student to wipe his nose. And I just thought, wow, who's this, right? So I sat down, and it turned out to be a creative writing. And so I thought, let me try to write a story. And I wrote a story about the chicken and the hen from China in a village. And Professor Wash said, and asked me to read it aloud in class, and it was a huge success. And I said, oh, let me write another story before I went to Tristan Shandy. So the second assignment was the first political event you ever participated. So of course I wrote about the Cultural Revolution, how I witnessed my mother being paraded, you know, her head shaved and being paraded on a truck, right? And so after that, Professor Lewis wrote, like, you should start writing a novel. And that was like Zen master just whacked me on the head and woke me up and just said, whoa, this is why I came to America, because I have a story to tell, right? And so that class was like the first and the last creative writing class. And after that semester, I thought I was like the best student, right? I was his pet. Then I found out that like Professor Lewis Walsh gave everyone an A, including my Korean classmate, who's my best friend. And I just thought, is that what creative writing is about, right? But then very soon, Professor Walsh called me and said Allen Ginsberg is looking for a translator to bring for the very first American Chinese Poetry Festival, and would I like to be his translator, right? And of course I just say yes, right? Even though there was no pay and a volunteer, and I really needed to work, and I was struggling pretty hard. My first few years in New York, I was like, you know, working under the table as a waitress and during the day, and then at night I would go to school, and I constantly fell asleep in class. And you know, there are some really nice professors like Bernard and you know, and Professor Walsh, and they all like brought me like chocolate and clothing for me to keep me awake and warm. And but that 3 months working closely with Allen Ginsberg and was like a turning point. Actually brought me into poetry, and I never wrote poetry before. And so then at the meeting, like the first big opening is at the Modern Art Museum, and I interpreted for Gary Snyder, all those like you know, Bei Dao and Gu Chen, those like the best poets from two shores, right? You know, and so that is like no return for me, that I just entered poetry. And I was supposed to get married in Montreal. I actually already like got into MBA from McGill University. I was engaged to a professor at McGill, and I already shipped all my possessions to Montreal, and then including my most two valuable Song Dynasty vases, right? Now they're worth like millions. And so on the Grand Station, right, the train, I just had to make a decision. Should I board the train and become a wife and a businesswoman, or should I stay in New York to be a starving poet, which literally meant I would be a starving poet because I had about 8 months to find a job to get a green card, right? And as a international student. And if I don't get it, then I have to go back to China. And but in the end, I like all the forces of poetry, right? You know, just great masters. And I decided like I would stay in New York. And so here I am still writing poetry. And thanks to LIU, life was really, really hard for an immigrant, but LIU just welcomed me all the professors who, just were so kind to me, and I'm grateful for the rest of my life.
Thank you both. I'd like to get to some of the questions that people have. One of our other English faculty members, Carol Allen, asked, what's it like writing poetry after 2 years of COVID?
I wrote about 100 haikus between April 2020 and or late March 2020, because I was in New York for break and came back right before the city shut down. I wrote about 100 haikus. And before I start, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, Jessica Hagedorn and Jaime Manrique, who were also teaching at LIU, and it was through Jessica that this sort of segues into the answer to your question. I started playwriting with Jessica, and she was very, very encouraging. So I wrote the haikus. I wrote about 100 of them, and whittled them down to a book length collection of about 75. And most of them had to do with silence. Most of them had to do with being inside. And then I started to take walks because, we live on a campus. So, and the campus was empty. And really started thinking about my relationship to what is called nature. There's that line in the first poem I read about the city-fied eyes. And I wasn't really able to, not that I wasn't able to, but I wasn't necessarily interested in, bucolic splendor. I was still missing New York and walking the avenues and walking the streets of New York. But the haikus sort of forced me to zoom in on the detail closely. And I just had those syllables to make the poem sort of jump. I was also thinking about what it meant to be Puerto Rican, what it meant to be Black in the time of COVID in a state like New Hampshire as well. So those are some of the preoccupations I had through those small poems. And then I, started practicing and reading plays and trying to scratch at my own attempts at dramatic writing. But I have been thinking about what it means to be isolated and quiet throughout. And also, being in New York, I remember just having this one moment where this man walked through and he coughed, and the effect that it had on the few passengers that were on the train, because the train was stuck in between stations. And I started writing a short play based on just that moment alone. So the language that we're using is different. Variants, BA2, that kind of lexicon that comes with a pandemic is also very interesting. So these are some of the things that I've been thinking about for the last couple of years.
Yeah. So for me, for 2019, I bought plane tickets to go to China for three trips. I was scheduled to do teaching, lectures, and book reading, and then also through Europe. And I was going to be in a castle as the guest of Lord Charles the Bruce, and that's another story. And I have not been back to China for 10 years, and I was really looking forward to see my mom. But just, you can just imagine what happened. So suddenly everything closed. And I tried to board the plane 3 times, and every time I was stopped. So I'm still trying, but it doesn't look like I could go back to China for a few years. And so I hope my mom will hang on for a while, right? And she is getting old. So meanwhile, because I couldn't go home, I started doing a lot of translation. When I was teaching I was so busy, I just could not find time to do the translation, and I let go my Chinese. And I was hoping to spend some time in China to restore my Chinese language. And now I can't. So I started translation from English to Chinese, from Chinese to English. I translated the whole book from by Louise and the Nobel Prize winner, and into Chinese, which actually is her poetry is not easy to translate. And it took me like 3 months every day, and I think I did a really good job, and people just really liked it in China. And then I started writing my own poetry in Chinese, first translation, then, started writing directly in Chinese. So gradually, I went back home through translation, through the writing, through poetry and stories. So yeah, that is my path. And now I'm working on several manuscripts of translation by poets from Tibet, Mongolia, and Xinjiang, and then also by poets along the Yellow River and the Yangtze River. And I have 2 manuscripts of poetry and a manuscript of essays. So yeah, so I've been busy, and I find, you know, like really it's like a time for me to just really self-care, and I spend a lot of time in the garden, spend a lot of time in the river rowing, training, and spend a lot of time at my desk doing just back and forth between China and America. And I really enjoy it. And even though I wish every day this pandemic would be over so I could go home, you know. But and otherwise, I feel it's just really good time for me personally.
Well, Payne, you're a model for people who are retired on the verge. I think we only have time for one more question. I do want to give this one from just on seniority. Our dean, Richard Sachs, asked a couple of questions, and essentially what he asked is, how do you wind up as teachers at prestigious universities? How do you wind up teaching, instilling that love of poetry for people when that's not really what most academic institutions are now sort of encouraging?
Willie, you want to go ahead first?
I don't know. I teach a beach rhymes and narrative class here at Exeter in the spring. And I think the joy that the students get out of creating their own rhymes, but with specific flows that are modeled on other hip hop artists and the entry points toward telling a story. Just the joy that they get out of encouraging each other whenever they recite their bars in class, and even sort of provoke me or ask me to recite mine. There's a fun in learning still, I think, and I think that's really important to emphasize if you are going to be a teacher in this day and age, because it's just with the understanding that you are in front of a student who's probably spent almost a year to a year and a half behind a screen, and that level of interpersonal communication and interaction might prove to be a little challenging in that moment. So I think the love of the word, the love of the sound, the attempt at rhyme, the attempt at telling a story still excites young writers, and that can only be continually encouraged throughout. Will they become writers later? I'm not sure. I don't know if that's even the purpose, but sometimes you'll have a student who is not intent, doesn't have any intentions of being a writer or being interested in literature, and they'll take a few classes and suddenly think, you know what, I think I might want to switch tracks, and and sometimes you feel like you might have had a little part to play in that decision. So I think the joy and the encouragement is still there. And I learned, I modeled my teaching practices over my mentors, and Raymond R. Patterson specifically, who was my teacher at CCNY, and the teachers I had at LIU.
Well, when I started at the college, at McAllister College, I was the only person as a visitor. We didn't have a program. And when I left, the creative writing program is as big as the STEM program. And so we have 5 full-time teaching creative writing. And we have many visitors teaching full-time and many part-time, right? And my best students actually were science students and econ major, history, and anthropology, and all the athletes, right? They have a saying among themselves, like, before you graduate, you better take a creative writing class with Ping, right? And so I've thought about this, like, why? Like, poetry is the least like profitable, right, thing, right? What can you do? You can't make money with it, right? Why so many people like so passionate about that, right? And my students, like, they achieve full attendance all the time. Some of them would take like 5 classes with me, basically a minor with me. And in the end, I just thought, for us, like poetry really allows us to get to know who we are, why we are here. And poetry is a great vehicle to express, right, our inner being. And also practical wise, right, a lot of my science students, they were just like delighted to inform me like how they used the poems and stories they wrote in my class for their application to get into like really prestigious like institution, hospitals, research institute, and like it's really difficult to get in, but they got it because the interviewers told them directly, we interviewed you because of your story, because of your writing. And I got like so many thank you letters from my students who majored in science. And of course, I'm guilty of stealing, a lot of students from history major, from econ major to creative writing majors, right? Or at least I encourage people in this age, you have to double major or major one thing and minor a few things, right? So the expense of like the knowledge, right? Especially if you're serious about writing, the more you know, the more you live life experience, the better you will be. So my teaching usually often I would take my students out like to paddle the entire Minnesota River for like a week, like canoe paddling, 4 days canoe paddling, right? To go to paddle through, the Mississippi River, and I will take my students to the Everest and Oliver St. John, right? And he went to the Everest from Tibet side and also climbed Everest from Nepal side, right, with me for the Kingship River project, right? And I also took students to like camp on the reservation, learn how to harvest wild rice, how to spear fish, right? And then I will bring the native elders to the campus. And I also brought like over 60, prominent writers and poets to the campus, right? So yeah, and for me, writing is not just in front of the computer. Writing is a living. The more you live, the more openly you live, the more you are willing to put yourself out to experience everything in life, the better you are. and the more alive you will feel. You know, I think that is the secret of my success. You know, thank you.
Yes, it's important that we bring our love and enthusiasm for literature to our students, and I think they do pick up on that. And I agree with you, Ping, that a lot of our best students come from those sciences. I tell them you're exercising different muscles in your brain when you're taking literature course. And a lot of them look at it as a release. You know, they can let out their emotions and their imagination that they can't in those science classes.
Yeah.
And I wanted to thank you, Ping, for people like Oliver, that you steered the LIU. You steered at least a half a dozen excellent students. Oliver is one of them.
Thank you.
So I want to thank both of you. Those who didn't get your questions asked, I think you get access to you know, Willie and Ping will get to see those, and they may respond to your questions if we didn't get to you. But I want to thank you all for coming and being part of this, and for bearing with our, you know, technical problems at the beginning. I think it was a wonderful week.
Thank you, Louis, and thank you, Deb. And
thank you, Louis. Thank you very much, Ping. Thank you, Deborah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Deborah, are you gonna close out now? Or just have us on? You're on mute. You're on mute, Deborah.
You essentially closed us out, Louis, so thank you for that. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Sorry again for the technical problems at the beginning. Big thanks to Willie and Ping for joining us tonight. It was wonderful to see you again and hear you read and listen to your wisdom.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
hope I can revisit the campus someday soon.
Please come back.
Yeah, I will if I have a chance.
And there will be there is a recording of this, so if anybody wants to tell their friends, they'll be able to see it on YouTube very soon.
Right on. All right. Peace, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good evening.
Have a great evening. Bye-bye, everyone.